I host this channel. I'm the founder of All to Love. I am currently broadcasting live from Morocco, a little town called Tagazout, which is a bit of a surf yoga destination, and I'm teaching yoga 6 days a week at a little surf hostel. And I have been engaging in some really lovely conversations with some of the um, participants and the people that are staying here, and it's a really international crowd. And so choosing love has come into my awareness as far as um, deep alchemical change and how we're able to support ourselves through painful and destabilizing times, and how moving through the pain of our existence and holding space for ourselves in love whilst we're uh, in really painful emotional times is the catalyst to our own transformation. And that it's not some sort of ethereal, out there, woo woo concept. It's a conscious choosing. As in, if we're in the fear and because we recognize that this world, for the most part, has programmed us to view things through the lens of separation, and that ultimately is the fear that we're continuing to perpetuate. And I feel that that fear and that separation is how we're able to continue these war cycles, and the perception of other, that another human being can be an other, and so it sort of justifies violent acts, or it justifies, wiping people out, which of course is an atrocity. And there's sort of deep, I would say, karmic consequences with regards to that choosing. So when we choose love, we begin the alchemical process of burning through the pain that we harbor, and knowing that our physical vessel is an ancestral lineage, right? So we carry the information of our lineage in the here now. And when people talk about breaking ancestral curses or breaking these patterns, we break it through feeling it, through feeling the deep abandonment or the deep betrayal or the deep grief and heartache and loss. And that in our ability to love the pain, or to love whatever feelings that we're having, it is a choice to not be a victim of our own feelings, but to embrace them, to hold space for them. This is why things like yoga and meditation are really quite useful for our ability to hold space. And there's so many different practices, anything that sort of brings us into the moment, that sensitizes us, that helps us to feel our body. And then this idea of choosing love, certainly in my experience, is, creating this All to Love brand, is that it is a persistent choosing. Because what I've experienced thus far is that the wounds can go deep, and we often waveform. So we might kind of get some a break from it, and then there's more, and yet there will eventually be a kind of bottoming out, as in I can only reflect my personal experience of looking back and knowing when I was getting to the root of some of the pain and distortion via a perspective of separation. And for me personally, there was a lot of very deep, hurtful feelings of neglect, self-abandonment, betrayal, mistrust, and feeling and or connecting the ancestral lineage, right, to the here now present moment. And then as you go on and continue to be guided in your journey of loving this existence, we'll pull in the energies that can accurately or appropriately reflect to us where we're at, right? And I recently had a psychic reading that was gifted to me by my sister, and the psychic said, like, you're here now, like, You're not going to have to go back to anything. You're not, and I'm starting to really get that sense of it, of the process of liberation, right? The process of liberation is through the the catalyst of pain. And of course, we live in a society that is stressed out, perpetuating fear and separation, perpetuating division on all lots of levels. And it's really up to us as individuals to choose love as a unifying field, to allow ourselves to express that and create from that place. It's and it can sound lovely, and people were like high vibration. I also was sort of in that world as well. And yet, really, really, when you commit to it, the alchemical process itself is going to eventually ground you into the love, so that you can hold those higher vibrations and stay grounded. I had an experience where I was sort of lifted up, and I was able to create the courses and write the book, and I didn't sleep much, and I didn't have to eat much, and it just felt like super duper blissful. Like, wow, this is incredible, and genuinely feeling like I was being supported energetically by a loving force, without the physical support, without necessarily the apparent money or the people that you'd think you'd need to do that stuff. But of course, there was a crash, and that crash led me deeper into core wounding. And I can laugh now, but for the last few years, it was like, holy shit, like, this is so painful, and this is so intense, and how am I going to get through? And you kind of just have to keep committing to love where you are, even if it's seemingly unbearable. Grand rising, Scotsetela. Right? And then when we authentically express who we are, we often attract the right people to support us on our journey. And like Scott says a lot, it's like, and this is also part of, so internet, and I would say some of the technology, the benefit and the beauty of it is our ability to connect globally and to find our tribe, as it were, globally. And yet, of course, there's polarity and contrast in this earthly plane. And so a lot of times what we're having to do is actually hold space for that contrast. And it's our ability to hold space for the contrast that actually alchemizes it to elevate it. And actually, I think it might have been a discussion I had with Scott about, so the up and down of alchemizing the deepest core wounding has brought me back to the same place I was 9 years ago, when I was lifted up. But the only difference is, because of the alchemical work, I'm able to hold those higher vibrations and hold those higher experiences without becoming ungrounded. And a lot of it was actually stabilizing the physical reality. And we're all different, and that's part of self-study and self-exploration, is that we're having to really reflect. And again, in our fast-paced world, we want quick fixes, and there's endless distractions to distract us and escape us from ourselves. So it's a choice, and it has to continue to be a choice, because we have a lot of resistance, and because we have a lot of programming that we're all working through as a species and as a collective. But certainly from a loving perspective, we're evolving, right? We're transforming. And I would dare say that a lot of the warring going on is the same warring that's always been going on. And it's coming from a place of fear, it's coming from a place of control. And on a global level, we're coming to an apex. We're coming to a point where we can no longer continue on the trajectory that we've been on. Thus, the humanity, the children of this planet, are awakening to that broader perspective. And this is something I'll reflect to, is that I can look back at my own spiritual awakenings over 20 years ago, and know that I didn't consciously choose that, right? I wasn't some 18-year-old kid going to university being like, and now I shall spiritually awaken. It happened to me. And this is part of our soul's code, right? Like we're all coded with information, be it the ancestors, but also the whole quantum, the entire field of our physical manifest reality is part of our creation, right? Not to take it on as some egoic construct, but as a unified field of a choice, right? And so often from the empath light worker community or starseed community, it's the love that you feel. It's your connection to the source that contains the entire cosmos, right? There's an infinite, eternal source point within all of us, and that source point is a neutral, unconditional love. And that's why every single thing, as painful as it is, or as distorted or dense as it might appear and feel, there is value in it, right? And it's our ability to continue to work our way through the triggers and to process the deeper layers, right? We do have layers of these emotions, and yet if we continue to distract ourselves, it can elude us, it can escape us, right? And you can even recognize that in my own shadow work phase, where I had to keep choosing, as painful as it was, and eventually I had to separate myself from certain connections that I could recognize weren't serving my own evolution, but were sort of impacting or compounding the drowning feeling like I'm never going to get out of this. And once I was able to have certain psychological breakthroughs, which actually lined up with certain planetary alignments, which is why I love astrology and find it really useful for self-reflection and also for maybe a bit more awareness of our own soul's evolution and what we're sort of here to do, is that was back in April, when Jupiter and Uranus actually conjuncted my Chiron, and I had a huge House of Cards moment, and all of this grief and memory from childhood came back, where I was doing sort of high level spiritual work and the karmic backlog and higher consciousness, and yet it led me right back to here now, this earth, this plane, and my own personal childhood. And people talk a lot about the inner child. The inner child is just a part of you that is joyful, innocent, and loving. And I recognize this too with regards to when we're wounded as children. Again, people often think that trauma is something radically horrible, but I'm becoming more acutely aware that for an innocent child, trauma can often just come from conflict. So when our parents fight, that can be traumatic for a little baby. And so we're not here to judge ourselves. We're simply here to experience the experience and endeavor to keep choosing the love, because the love is the neutrality that helps us catalyze that pain into power. But it's an empathic power. It's a grounded power. It's creative, right? It allows us to express more authentically. It allows us to be present with ourselves, with other people, and invoke non-judgment. We all have judgments, right? We all have programming that we're more than likely outworking if you're engaging with this sort of content. And there's something else I'll reflect too, is that when we're sort of at the beginning, or when we're endeavoring to make really positive change, there's very likely going to be a lot of kickback from your personal reality. People, places, things that are going to say, you can't be that. How dare you think that you could be joyful? How dare you think that you could be wealthy? How dare you, right? People will kick back, and that's an aspect of self-doubt, resistance, right? And or, again, a reflection of our unworthiness, that some part of us might not feel worthy of joy. And I don't know about you guys, but I definitely have wobbled through those of, I'm a big failure, or I have not been able to succeed, or I've not, and at the end of the day, in the here and now moment, what I'm aware of is none of that matters. As far as wealth is is a spiritual gift, right? Where truly, truly, regardless of the external reality, we have access to peace, we have access to love, we have access to a sense of benevolence, right? And regardless of what this world's programming would have indoctrinated into me, I chose to love, and I chose freedom, and I chose liberation. And in those moments, the world reflected back to me that same freedom, that same love. I've traveled the world, usually as a lone female traveler, and I've always been astounded by the generosity and goodwill of people on this planet. And it's often through facing our fears and walking through them that we then discount the fearful program, of it's not safe, or, certainly for women, they would say it's not safe. And I'm not saying that there's not danger, but ultimately we have a lot more power and dominion than we often give ourselves credit for. Hi, Chris, how are you? In truth, yeah. And I would say again, these evolutions are going to take a little time, but we're living at that apex, right, where this capitalist, colonialist, and systematic control, that is losing its force. Why, I wonder? Because the species is enlivening love. We ourselves are recognizing the contrast through the disparity of fear to endeavor to create something different. And it's not like we have to sit there and all collapse with the collapsing. We can choose to put our feet on the ground and create something different. And I say that with a bit of jest and lightness, because we're all going to have to go through a certain process that allows us to heal the pain that we're harboring from within self, to face down the shadows. And how that appears in our lives is often facing and having difficult conversations with people, or choosing to sort of remove ourselves from certain dynamics that are familiar, right? Or just having those, like, really facing our reality as our own. And of course, that is a super duper powerful thing. But the polarity is that for most of us, there's things and there's people and there's things that, cause us problems or make us angry or make us upset. And it's those moments that we have a power to choose to love no matter what, but to have enough self-respect to remove ourselves if that's what we need to do, or to face down a shadow if that's what we need to do, right? Right, so I did just feel like a bit of a download. I figured, because I've been guided back to Morocco, that I would have stuff coming through. And because I actually, when I had breakfast with the crew, the people staying at the hostel, I had breakfast with them, and one of the girls who joined the yoga lives in a community in Amsterdam, and grew up with a mother who teaches Kundalini, and she's very anchored in her yogic practice. But we were able to really align with, these edges, and how we might have the best of intentions, but things aren't necessarily what they appear, but we have to often live the experience to know the difference. And that's where things like privilege or entitlement or certain programmings can be a blind spot for us, because it's difficult, right? Because it's difficult to really know where we're not living in truth, perhaps. This is it, the shadow. So we could look at the shadow as an aspect of our ancestry, right? Where I could take my ancestry as an example. Both my parents are adopted. In my own alchemical painful healing, I'm aware that there's a lot of neglect, obviously abandonment, wounding, but also a societal distortion of control, and sort of, even you could say, religious conceptualizing, where, the bastard children, or suppressing ourselves to try to fit into this society. And healing that has in one way brought me closer to some people, but it's also created distance from some people. But I recognize the distance is offering me space to continue to heal. Threads of codependency or threads of denial. And increasingly what I'm aware of, which I think a lot of empaths and stuff could understand, is that the deepest wound is that my existence is the problem, right? That me existing as I am is not acceptable, that I need to not exist to make it okay for everybody else, which is kind of a conundrum, but that goes along with things like masking or things like people pleasing or whatever, which again, these are masks. These are things that we wear, which over time, the more you're connected to your heart and the more authentic you want to be, or the more just freaking honest you want to be, it just radically changes the game, right? Because well, often our society is very masked, right? We have to work, we have to do these things, and yet we're increasingly, I think, becoming aware because we're sick, you know, as a society. There's a lot of illness, and the more that we understand about our nervous system, and the more that we understand about our chakras, and our mind as a container that can perceive the totality of our existence and reality, the nervous system is like the thing, and being able to regulate ourselves and being able to calm ourselves down via the breath or conscious relaxation, to me at this moment is one of the most powerful tools that we have, right? Because early days when I was traveling and I was having these awakenings and just philosophizing and traveling and journaling and stuff, I can remember being on a tube in London, England, and people were rushing around and everybody was in suits and nobody was looking at each other and the tubes were really busy, and I was just there like perceiving it all. And I remember thinking, so we're on this really fast train, but or like we're on a freight train to nowhere. Like why is everybody rushing? Where is everybody going? Do they know? And then all these years later, I'm still acutely aware that the world is still moving really fast. And it's not the world that's going to slow down, it's us. But here's the thing, slowing down, it's almost counterintuitive when we're super used to being stressed. Like I have to work and I have to do this and that and da-da-da. The slowing down, once our nervous system gets more calm, we are actually far more efficient and productive and functional. So there's a real counter to like, and I was chatting with this young woman about that yogic stuff, and I said early days when I started teaching yoga, I would teach in some of the gyms up in Liverpool, and there would be people who would skip shavasana. And my sister reminded me, she said she went to a class where the teacher was asked to cut it out, and I said, well, to me, if you're not doing shavasana, if you're not implementing a relaxation practice into your movement practice or asana practice, you're not completing the practice, because relaxation is the masterful tool, especially in a very distracting, illusory world that we're all choosing to engage with, right? So the conscious control of like relaxing the body mind allows the mind to expand, allows us to hold space, allows us to perceive without judgment, which to me is where that creative essence really comes through, right? People talk about the zone, or they talk about the flow state. That is something that comes through us when we're relaxed enough, right? And embodied enough. And that's something I can reflect to all y'all. Like we can be really high vibratory, but if we're not anchored, that will burn us out. That will frazzle the nervous system, and potentially lead to psychoses, right? Just like people would say abusing drugs or taking too many psychedelics or, you know, having these addictions can lead to a certain psychoses, but so can spiritual work, right? And that's where the self, where I'm sure I saw the know thyself bit. And that's where the knowing of the self, because think of it like too, when people talk about like the system collapsing, but that includes all industry with regards, so accepting that even the so-called well-being and spiritual stuff are often still connected to industrialization, thus meaning this is how you have to be spiritual and this is what it looks like to be well. But in my personal experience, it's personal. My wellness looks different than other people's wellness, right? Like, and your wellness looks different for you. And we all have different wounds and different traumas that we're trying to work through. And so at any point of the journey, if we're in self-judgment or harboring shame to kind of serve another, to please another, it won't probably work, and we're still going to have to loop back to self. Something I'm directly experiencing 9 years later, where I'm brought back to the same place to teach, to surf, to enjoy the sunshine, and yet integrate the last 9 year cycle of very profound transformational shadow work, but alongside the shadow work, a creative energy, right? So choosing that creative energy, but alongside processing deep pain. And that's often in the light worker community, or even in some spiritual circles, they would have us deny the body and even make the body into some horrible meat suit, right? Or something to be ashamed of. It's like our sexual energy. Often there's a lot of shame and trauma around our sexual energy. Why is that? Because it's powerful. And if there are energies there to control us or wanting to sort of make us into something of their bidding, then it's our ability to choose ourselves and to choose our personal freedom. The truth shall set you free. But the truth isn't something you find outside of self. The truth is something you feel from within. And like choosing love, continuing to come back, because the love is a choice, it's a principle, and it's something that contains the totality of the entire spectrum of the entire cosmos, right? So it's and you know, often throughout my life, I would have very dismissive conversations with people who were like, yeah, okay, love. But really, it's these powerful people who are going to make change. Really, it's these billionaires or these politicians or whatever. And, you know, I'd often reflect on those situations and feel like, I disagree. I do think the power and the change is coming from the people. I think the power and the change is coming from just normal people saying, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be free. I want to be authentic. I want to feel love. I want to feel well. And this is where we're going to continue to see the apparition of community, more matriarchal communities, women coming together to support community and healing. And you could say the witches of the past reclaiming their healed state to heal the community, right? And that's the mother too, as in the Mother Earth, reconnecting to Earth, feeling our heart in a synergistic relationship with this planet, because she's us and we're her, so long as we're living here. But what we're recognizing is that all of us as beings are also infinite, and we have infinite dimensional experiences within our field, and we can extrapolate those experiences to help embody more of that totality and then express it in the human vessel, right? And that is also part of all of us being able to access the quantum field to heal, and yet still be able to live our joyful expression in our uniqueness, right? Enjoying food, enjoying our bodies, right? And reclaiming this idea of sacred. Because to me at this point, I'm like, oh my God, everything is sacred. Everything is sacred. And actually, all of us are in ceremony all the time. Like, this whole life experience is ceremonial, right? Like, the process. And it's only now that I'm starting to get to that point where I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this beautiful soul has chosen to incarnate on this planet for this experience. And it's so profound to get to a point where you really don't want for anything. As in, I love y'all for being here and for being part of this community, and I'm so grateful for the amazing souls who have showed up for me in my life. But to feel real peace and to feel real contentment, and to not want for anything is real liberation, because suddenly my shoulders can drop and I can relax, because the knowing that I'm fully held and fully supported. I feel a bit like crying, and I'm recognizing my dear friend Scott, who experienced near-death experience, and you often express that to me, like, we're so held, right? We're so held. But then to really come into that, to really feel like no matter what happens, I'm okay. Especially because, like, we all know we live and die. We have a temporary time in these bodies, right? And it's funny because I feel like I was having a session, but I can't quite recall, but they mentioned someone or other, and you'll see it on the internet, but these people who, hey, they want to reverse aging, and people who want to kind of try to claim and create immortality in these bodies. It's an interesting concept, and yet I personally, um, as much as I love this earth, and as much as I can have moments of absolute bliss and love in this body and this experience, it's temporal. I don't want to live forever here, because I know my soul is, like, I know that the expression that I'm living through in this body is the eternal seed, that I don't need to hold on to this body forever. I wouldn't want to. It's the contrast of this earthly experience is what ages us fundamentally, but it's part of the process to see death as a sacred part of life, because of that deep soulful connection that we feel from within self, right? So part of the reason I actually came on to chat was I wanted to share the view with you guys, because it's pretty special. Again, I'm in Morocco, in a town called Agazout, and the surf school is right on the beach, and there's the sea, and it's getting busy, and there's lots of people surfing, and I'll just come right up to the coast here. So let me... Allah Shazam. Oh look, see all the surfers going out? There you go. There's a little sniff of Morocco life. Well, I say that. I mean, this is a specific area. As I'm sure you guys are aware, places and countries can be wildly different. You go to Casablanca or Rabat, or go to Marrakesh, you'd get a very different vibratory. I think because of my yoga and because of my love of sea and surf, I tend to gravitate towards the sea, surf, and yoga places, because that's where I feel best, right? So thanks for being here, you guys. Minarets. I'm curious. Well, you can share on the WhatsApp too. You mentioned minarets the other day, and I'm like, minarets. Because I shared with Scott, I came into the shala early, and the morning prayer call was sounding, and you mentioned minarets then, and I'm like, do you mean the tower where they do the call from? I need to like Google that, or like look up the definition of that word. I don't actually know what that means, but anywho, there was a call. Yes, okay, cool. Yeah, so the day I sent the call, as I was walking down the high street, the tower was like right there. It was right in front of me, and I'm trying to think. Maybe it was around 7. So I haven't noticed it in the evening hours. But they definitely obviously did the morning call that morning, and morning call to prayer. And all the times I've been in Morocco, those morning calls, something, I don't know, there's just something really like special about them. So I dig on it. I dig on the vibratories. Yeah, there's something enchanting, different than church bells, and it's and I'm pretty sure it's actually somebody in a microphone doing the call. I don't think it's a recording. good old coffee. So I'm off skis. I've got more sessions to do. I'm going to enjoy the beach for a bit. I know you guys have asked, but no, I've not been surfing yet. I've only been here about 4 or 5 days, and I'm still working online. So and because I'm here for an extended period, I'm here for about 3.5 weeks. So I don't feel the rush. What's the rush? You know, I don't need to hustle to get in the surf. I can just, plus it's January, it's their winter, so the Atlantic is still pretty cold. Especially with the hot, when you're sunbathing and getting all hot, and then you're like, oh yeah, go in the sea, and it's freezing. But I'm just working up the courage. I'll get there, and eventually I'll get out surfing as well. But for now, I'm enjoying being held. I'm enjoying the fact, because this opportunity came up really serendipitously and very quickly. But then I reflect, it was exactly 9 years ago that I first came to Morocco and hosted a surf yoga retreat. And that was a catalytic moment, because I had a dream that was part of my sort of spiritual awakening cluster. So 9 years ago in Morocco, that dream came true. So it was a prophetic dream. 9 years later, I'm aware that that was an inception or initiation point. So that dream coming true then led me to the next phase of my own evolution, to create, to inspire, to love. I wrote my book, published it, etc. And then all these years later, I'm like, oh, and I'm back, right? Like, but the difference is that because of all the pain that I've worked through, my body and my mind can hold space for the next phase, right? But we're all very much living more in the intuition. I think that's the point. And rather than being in the love, light, high vibe brigade, we're just in the authentic, grounded, be here now, right? And don't deny the self. Just be with the self and allow it to express, right? And all of us are going to have a lot to, yeah, just kind of move through, but let's continue to intend to create more love, more feelings of heldness. And as much as some of our relationships can trigger us, increasingly I think we're becoming aware of how to hold space for those triggers, move through them, absolve ourselves of conflict. I have another little bitty that's coming in around, you know, the expression, I agree to disagree. I'm starting to realize, I think that's a bit, like that can be almost like a cop-out, as far as, because what I'm noticing is with really deep love and deep compassion, there's a sutra that says, understand through compassion or you'll misunderstand the times. And often if we're trying to meet somebody or resolve a conflict, saying I agree to disagree is actually a lack of empathy and a lack of compassion. Because from my perspective as a very compassionate person, is that I'm looking back at those moments going, see, I'd always be able to understand the other person, but then that person would always say, oh, well, we'll agree to disagree. And I'm thinking, well, see, no, that's a lack of compassion. So I can understand where you're coming from, but you're unwilling to find the compassion to understand where I'm coming from. Because there's one thing about holding space for the totality versus limiting ourselves to go, well, we'll just disagree. It's not about all agreeing, but there is enough compassion within to understand. And when we understand, we don't need to be in disagreement anymore, right? Anyway, just something to noodle on. Curious what you guys think. Have a great day, you guys. Great to be here with you. Thank you, Broken Heart, Scott Setzela, Chris. Thank you all for showing up in my live stream. And I'll see you at the beach. Take care. Peace out.